Okay. So like I was talking, and I'll just kind of go through this again, Mike, so it's on the mic. Um, we're going to use 5 points to make our editable spline. So in order to make 5 points, we want to have 5 spots for it to lock in. So this curve here is going to allow us to move it up and down, or this snapping to this here. It's going to snap to this point, so it allows us to move it in and out. We've mirrored it so that both will work on it. And then we're going to want to have the second one, and then we're going to have the middle. So with that said, again, we don't need to set in or dimension a point, but we want to mirror this one over. And we'll put that there. And we're going to go to our spline. Again, my preferred method, style spline. And that goes back to my alias days.
Yeah.
You can dimension a style spline the same as you can the other, but it's just, you've seen where it's just hard to work with in my mind. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3. Oh, so what I did is I missed something. And what I missed was...
I was wondering, I thought that was intentional.
No, what I missed was the going up and down. So sometimes, it's always funny because when you're explaining something, it's harder because you lose that flow. You lose that rhythm. So we're going to do that. And what I could have done, so instead of, Yeah, so what I could have done is instead of that, I could have just snapped to these 2 points. Now, the reason, and part of this is me thinking through what I'm doing, so it's always cool when I talk about it. The reason that I like to do the full line is because then I don't have to worry about trying to find that point that's there. I can just find the line.
Did you just extend the line like you would in Rhino?
Yep. Oh. So here's the trim command. And I can trim it. Let's click on it and I can trim it. But then what I can also do is it's buried. So a lot of SolidWorks is about setting up your trees and saving that out. Your command features. And we'll go over that another time if you want. So, but I can go down and go trim it, extend entities, and then I just click on it and you can see what direction it's going to go. So, okay, so we've got our spline in now. We've got all of our points. Let's go 1, 2. Hold on. I'm missing something here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, I'm not missing. For some reason, I thought I was missing something. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now, what is going on there? Oh, I guess I didn't really need this middle one because I can just drag this. So now we've got the 1. Okay. There we go. So I got to go put some of the relationships in. So to make sure that they're coincident. There we got that. There we got that. So now we've got our line all set up. The next thing, as I'm going to adjust this, I always turn on my curvature combs. That's going to help me see if I don't want an inflection, then this helps me to see that. If I want an inflection, I still want to see that. And you understand what an inflection is going to do in regards to a highlight.
Yes, I remember when I gave you a model with an inflection back when you were with GP.
I probably called that out pretty quick.
Yeah, well, it was very helpful though.
Yeah, and really, the thing is when you have an inflection, what to look for is as your highlight goes, you're going to see a highlight that kind of wobbles, or it's going to pool. So it's like a puddle of water. It's going to pool in that low spot, and it's going to become fatter. That's what happens when you're doing a highlight and you want it to be very smooth. You want it to accelerate, and you want it to go in a constant speed. If you have that inflection, it's going to kind of stop, blip, and pool. And a lot of people say, well, it's a stationary object, so it's not going to be, you're spinning your model. No one's going to see that, but they are, because you're going to walk around the model. The model doesn't move, but you will move, and that's where you'll see it. So, and you can see I also forgot to lock this, so let's just go there, and we will get our coincident. So now we got our fully defined one. Let's start moving it around. And here, as we can see this, we can see it dive off more. Now the question here is, at a certain point, let me rephrase that. At a certain point, where do we want to say that we're going to build our curves? Like, do we want to try to take this and get it to wrap? I want to make sure that's editing properly. Okay, yeah. Do we want to take this? And do we want to try to wrap it around at this point? At this point, too, I might as well turn off my curves or my inflections, because as you get modeling, you'll know when there's an inflection. When I teach my students, they're like, well, how did you know that? It's like, well, I'm used to seeing it. So that's the question. Like, do we want to try to do this where we're going to spend a lot of time tweaking and adjusting that to get this round? And you can see that it's going to be a lot of work, tweaking, adjusting, moving it around, because you're asking to create this is a more complex surface. So the moment I see that, what I tend to do is I break it out, because one, it's going to help to create a simpler model. And you can see right here, I know there's an inflection because my center spline, or my center point of that spline, is lower than my outside point. So that's going to give me an inflection. So we'll just raise it up. Let's just clean this up a little bit. And you'll see me zoom in and out just because I want to, I'm overly cautious. I've always got that fear that I don't have it properly defined. Now you can always, so where I laid out the construction lines first and snap to those points, if for reason you miss something, you can do it afterwards. So we're going to come in and we're going to say, that's what we want. Now, the reason I'm going to do this is because I look at this as a transition surface, this round. And a lot of times, your length, your width is going to get adjusted. But for us as designers, we really want to, if the radiuses are extremely important, which for this model, they are, because you want that clean, soft look, I want to have greater freedom over this. Because if I want it to blend in more, if I have this surface coming out here, that's my rate. That's my start point that radius is going to be. That's going to be my start point here. If I look at it and say, well, that's too much, then I've literally got to go and pull this surface edge back to there and then spend more time versus just editing that curve. So we're going to call that good. Our next step is we'll turn on our right one. Create our spline. I'm not going to bother to spend the time to So now, as we talked about last week, I like to use 5 points. It gives me that freedom to control. If I want to add curvature...
Spline or style spline?
Oh, wrong one. I usually notice that as soon as I try to edit it. I've got to change this so that my style spline is on top.
Yeah.
Oh,
You can do that?
yeah. Also, I never noticed this.
What?
Oh, sweet. See, I'm so used to clicking here and then looking at the screen. I've already got my degrees in.
Oh, yeah.
So if I click there, theoretically, I should be able to go start, end. Oh, well, that sucks. In Alias, if I select the 5 degrees, then if I go start and end, it automatically puts the other ones in it.
Oh, that's
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But anyways, what we were talking about was if I use 3, it's truly an arc and I don't have much adjustability over it. Where here I have more. So I'm going to come in, do this. Again, I know that I'm looking for those inflections. I'm also keeping in mind that I'm going to overbuild this just like I did with the side surface, but I'm going to start, I'll trim it back to here. So let's go in. We know there's an inflection here because this is more inboard than the top one. And even if it looks like it's going to be only needed as a 3 points spline, then I still add 5 points because there's always going to be that moment when you sit there and say, I want to get a little bit more curvature to this. Well, then you've got to go back in and rebuild it.
That makes sense.
Why is that?
You got a little bit of a booty there.
Yeah, and I don't know why. For some reason, it's locked. I wonder if that has to do with creating the actual. So that might be creating it with the class 5 that they say is class 5.
I remember the DeMonte group video I was watching was saying that I'll have to find the video again. But it was talking about like the different degrees. They're closer to like what you get with the spline with the handles.
Yeah. So what that means is what it's doing is it's saying if I'm moving this, it's going to force this to stay consistent. It's not going to move them all together.
Okay.
Which I don't like that.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, I'll have to see if I can find which video that was.
Yeah.
But
if you find that, share it.
yeah. By the way, thank you so much for sharing the DeMonte group with me. They've been invaluable.
Oh, you didn't know about them?
I knew about them when you told me about them all those years ago when I failed on the CAD project.
You didn't fail. It was an opportunity.
I did not deliver as expected on the CAD project.
Well, yeah, but it was an opportunity to learn more.
Well, that's failure. Failure is an opportunity to learn
That-
more. Failure is not inherently bad.
That's right. That, you know what? Yes, and that's something I teach, so I don't know why I'm arguing with you on it because you're 100% right. Okay, so I'm not gonna dink around with this too much. This is the problem when I'm teaching. I dive in and it's like I want to get it perfect, but the reality is it doesn't need to be perfect because I just need to teach you the philosophy. So we're just gonna say that's good enough. Okay, so we've got our top curve, we got our bottom curve. They're all overbuilt. again, we're going to come in, for this, we just need the swept tool. Where you'd want to do more control, again, swept tool gives us control at the top and the path it follows. If I want more control on where those edges are, then I would use a boundary where I would control the top curvature and the bottom curvature. Did we go over that last week?
It's hard to remember if I went over this with you or one of the videos I've been watching.
Okay.
One of the things that I often wondered is like, I know with boundary surface, sometimes what you can do is where you just have one guide and one profile, like you would with a sweep.
Yep.
Is there anything, like, is that an acceptable thing to do? And if so, what's the reason to use sweep instead of just boundary for everything?
Okay, so we'll go over that. So yes, so here's our sweep surface. And let me just do our swept. We're going to go sketch profile. And again, if I select that, and then I select this, what's going on there?
Sweep base.
No, surface. So we're going to do a swept surface there. And we're going to start with the profile first. And then we're going to start with the path.
Does the path have to intersect with the... does the profile have to intersect with the path?
I think so. I mess that up sometimes.
Well, I know in Fusion it doesn't, so it always makes the...
I know. When I jump back and forth between software, that's the biggest problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to edit this. We're going to click on that point. We'll click on this curve, and we're going to say pierce. So it makes sure that it hits. Actually, no, you shouldn't. You don't need to do that because swept surface.
Get down.
We're going to go here. That's going to do the same thing. There we go. So I don't know why it's doing that because normally you can do it either way. So by clicking the spline first, what it's going to do is it moves that top curve. So if I want to move this in and out, then I move the spline. So again, since it's at the middle, it only knows one direction to go. So we want to make sure that it knows to go in both directions. Now, here's where you use the spline, the swept. It's a simpler surface because you're using less amounts of curves, less UV points. So if I come in and I go... We can edit this, and what you can do is in the edit button or in that surface tool, I can show curvature comb for that surface going in all the directions. So here is where I'm going to make sure I don't have any wobbles. Just a second way to do it. As we talked about before, build, evaluate, refine. I can toss in some zebra stripes just to make sure I've got what I want. So here I can keep it normal, follow, do tangent faces. I can also see, so you see how many things I have here. It's a nice, clean, simple surface. My isoparms are somewhat equal geometry, left and right, so it's nice. And that's what you want when you can, that your isoparms are evenly distributed. That's helping to show the mathematical structure of that surface. and that it is in its best situation to be a clean surface. Now, as I was talking, let's turn on our surface.
Quick question, sorry.
Yep, no.
Is it ever acceptable to have isoforms that aren't evenly distributed? Because I know sometimes in Rhino,
Yeah.
the only way you can rebuild it is it will be less even.
Yeah, I mean, it's having... So, textbook answer is no, your isoparm should always be perfectly clean, yada, yada, yada. Reality is, no. I mean, you have to know that you want to try for clean isoparms, but you're not always going to get it. And then you have to understand, do I spend 10 hours trying to get a perfect isoparm? Or is what I've got good enough and no one's going to see it?
Okay.
It's kind of like having curvature between surfaces. If I'm doing curvature between a surface and its vacuum formed part, and it's 0.8 degrees off, I'm going to call that acceptable, because that's all that's needed and that's what might be done. Now, if I'm doing automotive surfacing, no, that's going to be class A. It's going to be perfect. We're not going to want to see any of that anywhere. So that's really the difference between class A is the restrictions. So here with this, I've got this surface built. I used a swept, which means that this surface, the start and end is always going to be the same. And when I say it's going to be the same, it's going to be controlled off of this CV. So you can see as I'm moving this, that the bottom's moving at the same time.
Okay.
So let's just get out of there. Now, where you want to use a lofted surface, either lofted or boundary, is that you can use multiple profiles and multiple guide curves. So if what I want to do, let's just go file, save. For this, I'm just going to open up a new one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a curve on my top plane. And this is all because I may have a more complex form. I want to keep it I want to be able to have more flexibility, more adjustability. And for this, I'm going to only use 3 points just to make it simpler. And sometimes this is what I'll start by building off of. Because again, we talk about a little bit of work up front means that it may be easier to do it downstream. So what I'm going to do is this is going to be where my top surface is. We're going to insert new reference geometry. Oops. Got to get out of my sketch first. Toss in a new plane. Yeah. Okay, let's come in here. We're going to go Control C. Start a new sketch. Control V. So all I did was I copy pasted it up to the top.
Now, is there a reason you do that as opposed to convert entities?
Meh. 6 ways to do the same thing.
Okay. Well, wait, I number of entities, you wouldn't have the handles. So, question retracted.
Well, but what you could also do is you could come here and so let's come in. We'll grab that curve. And you can see we've got relationships on the edge. So let's delete that. But what you'll notice is I have that middle point. I can't control it by the other areas. So what you can do is by copying onto this sketch, I can then easily sit here and say, okay, well, we're going to snap that to there. Now, I don't want to snap it to the point on here. So let me just, I'm going to come in. So you can see how this is going to take me more time to set up than the swept surface. Because the swept surface, I'm doing 2 curves. Mirror these over. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to simply snap this to here. And maybe I want to start off with these being close to identical. So I'll move that there. We'll move that out. And I don't want to have it snap to that point. Huh, for some reason. There we go. We're having a bit of a glitch. But anyways, I won't worry about that. Now, if I was to put a spline in the center, and we'll just drop one in quick. I'm going to take this point. I'm going to pierce it with that. Take this point, pierce it with that. Now, with a swept surface, I can only do 1 and 2. I can only do 1 and 2. If I come in and I do the lofted surface, I can then say, what are my profile curves? Let's delete that. What are my profile curves? My profile curve is from here. My next one is down to here. And you can see that it drops it right in. Now, oops. By doing a lofted surface, I now, if I turn my curves back on, I hate how it defaults to invisible. If I turn my curves back on, I then can control what happens at the top and the bottom stays the same. Now, the problem is I don't control what happens in the middle. So it's always a straight line that it's going to go from. It's going to go from here in a straight line down to here, because that's the only control I've given it. Now, if I come back in and I say edit feature, because I want to make sure that the top may be different than the bottom. So that's why I've got the 2. But then I want to control what the guide, what the guide curve is. So now, with that said, whoops, same thing. I can now control 3 points. I can control what it's doing down. Keeping in mind, I'm controlling what happens at the center. I don't have control over what's happening in the middle, because in the middle is combined by wherever this point is, wherever this point is, and wherever this point ends up. So there, now we got a more complex surface. Still, it's more complex because more math is required to generate it. It's now, instead of using 2 curves, it's using 3 curves, more computation. And that is one of the key things, is that, you know, it gives you more control. It's always great to start with a basic, you know, like the age-old thing is the simplest surface with, you know, the cleanest surface. Well, sometimes the simplest surface doesn't work. It's kind of like we were talking about using a 3-point spline is only going to give you so much control versus using a 5-point spline. So, but still, you can see I still have a nice clean grid for my surfaces, so it's still a clean surface because I'm only using really basic curves. Now, let's do this. We're going to take this. Well, I'm not going to bother to show that. If I was to create a spline, you know what? Can we do it? Yeah, we're just going to do it, but I'm going to really do something that I try to tell people to stay away from. And that is I'm going to create a
Oh, 3D spline.
There are times to use 3D splines, but 3D splines is SolidWorks' attempt to give you the freedom that Rhino and other surface packages do.
Yeah.
But it sucks. If you're working in 3D, it sucks. But there are times where I use 3D splines, and we'll get into that another time. And to be honest, and let's be fair to SolidWorks, they suck by my opinion, and maybe I haven't spent enough time to really learn it. So that's the downside of being self-taught, is that I haven't had someone show me how powerful they are, and I didn't take the time. So anyways, let's say we go back and we decide we want to have complete control over this surface. We want to have variation at the top, between the top and the bottom. We may want those to be different. We want to maybe have variation on the sides. So again, we're going to come in and we're going to edit our loft surface. Oh, let's get over. And we're going to just change it. So we've got the 2 sketches at the top and the bottom. We're going to get the control out of the middle. And we're going to add, after I show those. Oh, this is another thing I hate. So we created the 3D splines after we created the loft surface. Oh.
So now you gotta delete the loft?
No. It's because what happened was I snapped them to the point of the surface. So I can't move it above because it got snapped to the point of the surface. So I'm going to hide the surface. We'll edit this. And we'll make sure now that this is snapped to the sketch. Because I generated the sketch prior to generating the surface. That's the one thing that I hate about feature-based menu trees, is that when you go to edit something, it rolls back to wherever you edit it, which is fine. And there's a lot of power to that. But in things like Alias and Rhino, the nice thing is that I can go back and edit any spline or any curve, and if it's got association to the other one, it updates it. Okay, so let's see if by doing that, yeah. So now you can see that I'm not snapped to the surface. I can move that up. So, and the reason I have to move that up is because I want to edit that surface and I want to add these. So again, we've got control over the top, the bottom. Now we want to give it control over the sides. Oh, let me just show something. So these two 3D splines that I created are in one 3D sketch, which means that when I go to, I want to select both of them. What I need to do is click one and then hit accept. Hold on 1 second, okay?
Sure.
Sorry, wife started up the vacuum cleaner. I'm like, let's not have background noise. So it's an open loop. So we select that. And now we need to select the next one. We're going to go, whoops. Oh. I've done something completely wrong here. Okay, so we got that. Then we're going to select this one. And you can see how now it's snapped to that edge. So now we do this and our surface disappears. Because for some reason I hit it. You know, so when you're going fast or you're doing something and something all of a sudden happens, especially when you're new to SolidWorks, stop, take a breath, and just go, okay, is it hidden? Did it blow up? What is it? Because sometimes, you know, you're learning, you start panicking, you start doing all these things, and it's like Occam's razor. Simplest problem, or the simplest solution is probably it. So what I can now do is let's show our 3D splines. Make sure those are all shown. I now have control over the top. I have control over the bottom. And I have control over each side.
Okay.
Now, at the same time, I no longer have control over the middle though, because I got rid of this middle spline. So let's go back in. We're going to add, and it doesn't really matter what order. That to it. And now you can see considerably more control, because now I can also control the middle. So if I want to have it dive in, I'm getting more of a control over the surface. So here we're getting to be more complex. Now let's just... Still a clean surface though. Part of that is because we only used 3 points. Now you can do a whole lot of things. If you want to add another one in here and get it in, it's kind of like doing sub-D modeling in the sense that you can't push and pull and drag specific areas, but you can start getting more complex forms in one surface. So that's kind of where I used loft surfaces. And you can use boundary surfaces the same way, however you want to do it. So they're kind of very similar in some senses, but we'll get into down the road some of the complexities. So let us now go back to our other model. And what we want to do is we're going to mirror these surfaces over. Interesting. So we're just going to come in. We'll mirror it. This is where I like building. So this is where I definitely will mirror things. Like you saw how I was hesitant to mirror my curves. But now I'm more than willing to mirror my surfaces. So let me just also turn off these.
That makes sense, because then you wouldn't have like the flat or the kink.
Exactly. And then now here I'm clicking all the sketches to hide them. I can come up here too and go View, Display, or sorry, Hide Show. And I can turn off all sketches or I can turn them all on. Depends on what you want to do. So then let's now mirror this surface. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to start trimming things back and getting the shape. So I'm going to start with trimming top and bottom, front and side. So let's just come in here. We're going to go like this. This is where I can control my height. So this is where you might want to drive a dimension. So I'm just going to simply, for the sake of ease, I'm just going to do a straight line.
And bringing up dimensions, so I know that right now we're not at a stage where we're going to define the splines. Is that something that we would define later on at the end, or just leaving everything undefined so we can edit more easily?
Yeah, so good question. I don't necessarily define my splines until the very end, because right now at this point I'm still trying to get the forms that I like. I'm still pushing, pulling. If I define my splines now, I have to use numbers to adjust things. And for me, it feels like it takes away some of that sculpting ability. All of a sudden now, I'm putting on my engineering hat, and it's not just push, pull, drag. So I wait till the end. I wait till the end where I've got the over form. We love it. But now we need to dial it in more. So that's just bothering me. So we're going to just do that. And you can see by not doing that spline right, I'm going to get a weird curve. For all intents and purposes, that's fine for now. By the time we speak next, I'm going to go in and clean this up because it's really, really bothering me. So what we're going to do is we're going to trim these back so that they're smooth on the top and the bottom. And we're going to say, okay, let's get out of that sketch. I'm still in the sketch. So we're going to go surface, trim surface. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my sketch tool versus a surface tool or whatever. And we're going to click on the pieces to keep. So we want to keep this. We want to keep this. And we want to keep this. And we want to keep this. So now I've trimmed it from the top and bottom. So when doing solid modeling or surfacing or any kind of modeling, one of the nice things as you get to be more of a nerd is fewer steps the better. I can do a model really simple where I use 100 steps, but that's 100 steps. That takes time to regenerate. That takes confusion. That takes, a whole large menu tree. So it's always about finding how can I do it in the least number of steps, especially if you're going to edit it later. So for me, we want to build we want to get it set up so that we can now build our radiuses. Well, I'm going to trim these surfaces back, because if I come back in here and I show my top sketch, we're going to go to our top view, and you can see here, I'll wait till you look.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Take your notes. I'm going to trim them back at these points. That's going to give me that space to do my transition surface. Now, again, why would I use the trim command to trim these surfaces back if what I'm going to do is trim at this point anyways? So, and another thing too is we could have done these individually, but let's say for some reason we're going to want multiple curves. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw the lines that I'm going to use to trim these. And again, I'm not going to get overly complex. So we're going to say that this is where I'm going to want my radius to start. This is where I'm going to want my radius to end. And it's not really a radius, because a radius is a 3-point arc.
A quick question.
Yep.
Now, would I normally want to try and make the trim lines perpendicular to the spline, or is it fine if it's just like vertical and horizontal?
I'm sorry, say that again.
So with the trim lines, is it fine to just have them vertical and horizontal in most instances, or would it usually just be, or sorry, would they usually have to be perpendicular to the spline or to the arc? So this way it trims.
Oh, okay. So let me show you why I'm doing this. Because for this, it depends on what you're doing. So for this, I know in your design or the model that we're doing, let's come up here. We'll show this. For this, I know that they're going to go straight down, okay, at this point. So I'm not worried about having a bow, but you can do the other. It all comes down to the concept of your sketch. So let me just go back here. I'll show you this here quickly. I want to trim up all four. And again, the reason I'm doing this is maybe I want to do them separate or edit them. For this, I'm going to say I'm never going to have an edge surface different than the other. You know, at this point though, because my curve is not mirrored, what I could actually do, and I'm going to actually get out of here, because I'm going to say, I'm going to come back and say, my spline is always going to be perfect. Okay? These four corners are always going to be the same radiuses. I'm never going to have this corner be different than this corner. So really, there's no reason for me to mirror things at this point. I can trim this back and trim this back and work on it as a corner. So let's take that approach. So for this, because then when I mirror the surface over, because my spline is not mirrored over, I don't ever have to worry about that baby's butt. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to trim these back and we're going to focus on just one corner. So what I'm going to do here is go back into my sketch. And no, you know what? First thing I want to do is I want to trim these surfaces back. So I'm just going to come in. We'll go to our surfaces. We'll get out of that sketch. Trim surface. So what we're going to do is trim tool is we're going to use a plane this time just to make life easier. Plus we always want to make sure it's trimmed at 0, 0. We're going to select this to keep. We'll do the next surface trim. We're going to use the front. We'll remove that. Oh. I selected the wrong part. So we're going to go trim there. And we want to keep that there. For some reason, my bottom, I must have rolled back too far. So now here's the next thing. I could come on here and I could draw a spline or a line like I did before. Or I could come in and I could use that. Or I could come in, insert reference geometry, and control it like that. And use that. Now, the nice thing about this is I know that I'm going to want to draw a curve on here to do that transition. In order to do that, I'm going to need to create a plane. So by doing this, it's one less sketch. So I don't need that sketch. We can delete it. But here's where it becomes, for me, very anal. I hate trying to search for planes. So I'm going to go with bottom surface trim. So now I know that when I do my trim, surfaces, trim surface, I'm going to use that surface there, and I'm going to remove that and remove that. Let's try that again. I never pay attention to what my button is I'm pushing, so I always forget it's on keep. So we're going to use that, and we'll keep this, and we'll keep this. So now what we can also do is we want to trim up the top. So here's where we're giving a little bit of control. I'm going to come in, I'm going to insert more reference geometry. We're going to drag that up, and we're going to whatever it's going to be. We're going to say it's that. I'm going to name it. Now, I don't know if engineers like this or not. I'm going to trim it. Using that, and we will keep that and that. I can now come back in and say, well, if that's my actual top, if I need to trim it more, I can edit it dimensionally. And I can always know that that is 10. So we've got that done. Now let's come and we want to trim out our corners. So right now, I don't necessarily have this trimmed to the perfect height because I'm going to use my surface to trim it. I just want to get a clean start and finish. So we're going to come in, we're going to create a sketch. We're going to do it there. We're going to do it there. If you want, again, you could dimension this. And you could say, well, we're going to trim it here. Whoops. And we're going to dimension it, and we're going to, how the hell did I get that on 4 inches? Almost perfect. And we're going to say 4 inches. So from here to here, center to here, that radius is going to start at 4 inches. You know, and let me just show that as we go. Here I didn't dimension it, so I have some freedom. So what we're going to do now is trim back the surface so we can cut that out. And we are going to go trim surface again. Sketch tool's already selected. And we're going to keep this. And we're going to keep this. So now we have our surface with our corners. Now you can also see that it starts getting very busy with planes. That's the big thing about SolidWorks. It's plane heavy. So now, but here's the thing. I'm going to come in, and this is where you can use a 3D spline or you can use a 2D sketch. But I'm going to come in and I'm going to draw my top spline. And I'm going to go from here. We're going to do our sketch. And what I'm going to do, we talked about it before. So if we want to have curvature on this edge, we're going to snap to here. And if I want curvature, I have to have my first point, which is tangent, my second point, which is curvature. If I want to have control over the center, then I have to have another click. But then curvature, tangent, and position. And that gives me this radius. Oh, and you can see what I did. I wasn't paying attention. I snapped to the bottom edge. So let's just delete that.
Now, in this instance, is this something where you're trying to get G3 curvature, or would G2 be acceptable?
So I want to try to get G3.
Okay.
And the reason I want to try to get G3 is because in your concept that you provided me, it's a nice, smooth, rolled radius. So, and again, it depends on what your vision for the end product is. If you think G3 or G2 is going to be good enough, keeping in mind that G1 is positional, so it could have an angle. G2 is tangential. G3 is curvature continuous. Keeping in mind that G2, you're going to get that radius where it just kind of rolls over, and you're going to see where the highlight starts and stops during that transition. Well, for this, I want a nice, smooth, seamless thing because that's what makes this look soft and clean. So we're going to come in now, and what I want to do is I'm going to take this curve and I'm going to snap it and get G3. I think for this, we're just going to go G2 to make things simpler. Now you can see when I edit the tangent that my curvature comes in and out. We're going to come in here. Same thing.
So one of the problems that I keep on getting when I try to do this approach, because this is what I've been doing in my spare time, is whenever I try to get curvature continuous on both sides of it, it keeps on telling me that it's overdefined. Or especially, so like, for example, if I have it pierced on both sides and then get curvature continuous, it tells me it's overdefined. And then, like, if I delete the pierce, it's like, okay, this is fine. It's pierced on this part, but it's not pierced here. It's still fine. It's very confusing to me. And I'm afraid that would make it not parametric, where I need to...
Are you taking the same approach that I just did?
If not the same, very similar. So I was basing it off of one of the DeMonte Group's videos where they were talking about getting G3 curvature. So I'd have two surfaces that I build up, trim back, and then I would build a spline on the plane, and then I would make them pierce the surface where it comes up, and then I would,
which is what we did here.
Yeah. Then I would make it curvature continuous on both sides, and that's usually the first one would usually be fine. And then if I do the second one, I would say this is overdefined.
Oh, okay. So let's take a look at this because I know how you're doing your splines. So. In order to get curvature continuous, first one is tangent, second one is curvature. Now, I'm thinking this is what you're doing. I may be wrong. So we're going to snap there. We're going to do a point. We're going to do a point. And we're going to snap there. We're going to come in. And we're going to make it curvature. Then we're going to come in. And we're going to make it curvature. Nope. Which it can't truly be curvature because I only have 2 points of tangent. So that's not what you're doing.
Yes, so I do give it 5 or 7 points, and then no, that has to be 5. Yeah, we do 7 point or 5 point. I mean, sorry, bleh. And I don't build it on the thing because that would give a coincident relation. I build it just next to it, and then I pierce. Actually, let me see.
Huh.
Sorry, I probably got us on a rabbit hole now.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Sometimes it's understanding what's going on there.
As I'm testing this, watch it work perfectly.
Wow. Yeah. And you never know what is that one little thing that we missed or that was missed.
Yeah. Well, I can. I'll see what I can. What I'll do is I'll create like a bunch of screenshots walking through my process. I can send that to you to see what the.
Yeah. Yeah, do that so we can take a look. Okay. So, I'm not going to draw the bottom one. And after we're done this surface and I show you quickly, I think we'll be done for today. So you can see that I've got my surface created. And then for this, we're going to do a lofted surface. Because we only have one sketch, but we've got 2 guide controls, we know from what we talked about earlier what? Oh yeah. Okay, if we're using the loft so here's the thing. So I can do a sweep and I can say there's my sketch and then there's my other surface. But you can see how it doesn't attach to here.
Yeah.
But what I can do is I can come in and add a guide curve.
Okay.
Come on. And it did not like that.
So in trade, so you would use the sweep rather than the boundary surface for that?
No.
Okay.
I was trying to get away with not drawing another curve. So let's just we'll draw our second curve. So, and here's another thing. If this all said plane, 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 I wouldn't know what it is, but because I named it, I know that, hey, this is what I want to sketch on.
Yeah, that's something I can't get over with Fusion, where like instead of having a named feature tree to your left, it's just a bunch of icons at the bottom.
And you can name the things,
Yeah,
and you can
point to it.
No. It's, yeah, I don't, that's the difference between SolidWorks and Fusion that I don't like, is the feature tree. I find that the feature tree in SolidWorks is a little bit nicer.
It's a lot bit nicer.
I was trying to be nice.
That's okay, Jeff Smith isn't here, he can't hear us.
That's right. But there are some things in Fusion that I like considerably better.
Yeah.
So I didn't.
Trade-offs.
Yeah, I didn't do the right number of points, but who cares?
I won't tell anyone.
Okay. So now we've got that. Now we can do our lofted surface. we're going to go, oh, okay. So we're going to go from there up to here. Oops. And this is something just for anybody else who's going to watch this video. I clicked the line, the bottom loft or the bottom profile here, and then I clicked the top profile up here. It's trying to do a cross. It won't let you, so I'm just going to bring my green dot over there. And then I'm going to select that edge, and we'll select the next edge. And we're going to say accept. And then what we're going to do is, again, we may not want to knit this 100%, but again, we're going to build, evaluate, and refine. So I'm just going to quickly knit it. And you can see I've got solid black lines. So I have tangent lines turned on to be phantom, which means that if I come in and I go evaluate, and I come in and I check angle deviation, this isn't going to be nice. And you can see we got a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Now, that's because in this surface, I didn't, oops, that's my trim. In this surface, I didn't give it any start or end parameters. So I can say at the sketch, I want start and end parameters. There's no sense in doing that because I'm not building off of another surface. But on the guide curves, I can't either. So this is where I want more control. We're going to come in and we're going to delete that. So you can see I only had so much control over there, right? On the loft. I couldn't control the left and right. Now if I come in and I use a boundary surface where I want to have even more control, I'm going to say from here to here, and you see that my feature allows me to do direction or normal. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go from here to here. Now, if I hit accept and I drop it down and I stitch it, sorry, my puppy's being...
Well, that's just how huskies are.
I know. They're vocal when they don't get what they want.
Or when they do get what they want.
Yep.
Or when they're bored.
So you can see I still have the black lines.
Yeah.
So I'm going to come back. I'm going to edit this. Now we're doing our curves quick. If you do your curves correctly, you don't need to cheat. But I'm going to cheat and I'm going to say here, it has no relationship. It's just doing whatever it does. I can come in and say, you know what? I want curvature to face. Okay? I'm telling it that's what I want. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give it to me. I want curvature to face on this edge. So it's going to adjust things. Now you can see we know that we've got at least tangent on the edge because it's showing me that phantom line. So if I come back in, but I still want to evaluate because it may be tangent, but how tangent is it? So we'll go with deviation analysis. And it's perfect. Exactly what we want. So here, in this method, we were using our curves. Okay, now let's say I decided that doesn't look like what I wanted. I want this edge to start in further. Well, here's the advantage of what we did. So we're going to come here. Oh. We'll show our sketch. And I'm going to move this in. And it updates. Now, this is why I don't like to define it. Because if I want to move this in, I've got to come in and edit the dimension, 4.5. You know, versus I'm still at the point where I just want to drag and pull. I just want to find that nice look. And then, so let's say if I had done these with the class 5 curve where I could have a middle point, I could adjust this, then we would be good. and I could adjust the sides. Now, another way to build this transition surface, and this will be the last thing I show, is, because my dog's getting really spastic, is what I can do is I can come in and I could go from a lofted surface, because all I care about is from here to here. So I'm going to go loft. I'm going to go from here. I'm going to go to here. It gives me a straight line. But I'm going to use my constraints. I'm going to say at the start one, I want that to be curvature. You'll see this little arrow. That'll come into play in a second. My end constraint, I want curvature. So we're going to get a very similar surface. I'm going to update.
Give us G2, right?
No, G3, because it's got curvature.
Oh.
So I'm going to come in. I'm going to knit this. Find my knit command. We're going to knit this. And you can see we've got our phantom edges. We'll come in. We'll evaluate. Now you can see in the center it's perfect, but the bottom's a little bit off. And that's because I'm controlling what happens from edge to edge. I'm not necessarily controlling 100% at the bottom and the top. So you can see before, when I had more control, because I had control at the top and the bottom, and I was saying, I want this to be this at the top. So this is where sometimes, you know, if this is good enough, or if I was going to trim this surface back even more, then I might consider this fine. I don't care what's going on up there, because I'm going to trim it. That's also why you overbuild, because sometimes it's hard to get at the end of that surface perfect what you want. You know, so if I knew I was going to overbuild this, then we're good. So, but what I'm going to do now is, if I come back and I look at my loft surface, one of the things I can do to edit this, so I can't pull CVs on a curve, but what I can do is I can pull these little arrows. And what that's going to do is change the weight of the curve. So if I come in, you can see here where I'm updating what's happening. So, oh, too far. So I can get a tighter, my wife doesn't realize she's now going to be on the video for 300 people. I can control that curve, but I don't like this, because in order to do it, like, it just feels like I can't get that minute adjustment. It jumps around too much, you know, but I know exactly what the weight is, you know, so the weight is 2. Well, I can't tell you what the weight is on the CVs unless I dimension them out. So that's kind of 2 different ways of getting this boundaries. Now, like I said, this actually is, we deviated so far from how this looks, so I'll clean it up for the next class or the next time we talk. But once we've got this done, and we refine that, because this is the primary surface. If this doesn't look good, if this doesn't feel right, everything we do from here on out isn't going to be right. So that's where, if I'm building a primary surface, I want to get those things right first. So really, this is the primary surfaces. This is the secondary surface for this section that we're building. You know, the transition piece. And if we don't get all this right, when it comes time for us to build off of it, we're not going to like this. So that's kind of where we go. And you can see, if I'm looking at your sketch, you can see where my surface, oh, hold on, let me turn that off. So here you can see I'm evaluating this and saying, oh, I don't like where this surface is. Well, that's not actually the surface edge. I'm pulling up. Let's turn off curvature. Huh.
sketch mode to turn on curvature cones?
I think I actually, let's turn this on and edit it. I have mesh preview curvature turned on in the surface. Huh. Nope. So I've got it turned on in the surface and I've got it turned on in here. So let's just do that. So, but you can see how my surface bulges out and it's not where it needs to be. But then we're going to start, so next time we talk, I'll have this cleaned up and we'll also talk about how we start evaluating the transitions for the highlights.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you taking all the time to do this.
Yeah, not a problem. Like I say, you're going to teach me how to be a better sketcher, so it'll all come about.
Yeah, please do, because I would love to do anything to repay this favor, because this is the kind, I'm honestly really jealous of your students. I know this sounds like such a cheesy, trite thing that people say just to be nice, but I do genuinely mean that.
So here's what I'm always willing to do, and I don't let a whole bunch of people in. I am happy next semester to let you sit in on the Discord channel. In the beginning, it's going to be basic, so you may not want to sit in on it until the second semester, or when you've got time, pop in, because they're in evening classes. But then what I would want is for you to take a class or to take an hour as a professional, and we'll come up with a topic for you to talk to the students. Whether it be sketching, whether it be demonstrations, whether it be, hey, you're 4 years out in your career, here's what you've learned since you graduated. You know, or here's the things where, hey, I needed to learn this, or I focused on this and it helped me because. So that's usually what I do when I, that's one of the trades I can do and give that to the students.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop recording now.